Okay, thank you. Today, I would like to share with you the 4,000,001 reasons to make business more inclusive. But I only have 15 minutes to do it. So are you ready?
Yes.
Are you sure you're ready?
Yes.
Okay, calm down, calm down. But first, let's start instead with a little quiz. Now, you look like a room full of smart people. So can anyone tell me what country this flag and map belongs to? Shout it out if you know. Okay? This is Rwanda. Did you know Rwanda was ranked in the top 5 countries in the world when it comes to gender equality? It has 68% of its parliament being women. It also recently opened the world's first drone port, delivering medical supplies and blood to remote communities. Okay, let's try this one. What country is this? Bangladesh. There we go. Bangladesh's surging economy and active civil society has brought 20 million people out of poverty in 2 decades. This one. Ethiopia. Very good. Ethiopia is the second largest country in Africa with over 100 million people. But it's also the second fastest growing economy in the world, growing at over 7% a year. Next. Costa Rica. Thank you. Someone been cheating down here. Costa Rica gave up its army to invest in education, health, and the environment. The small country made headlines recently by producing 100% of its electricity using renewable energy sources. What about this one? Kenya. Very good. Kenya's thriving tech and startup scene is worth $1 billion, with 25 tech hubs in Nairobi alone. And what about this one? No? This is Santanui. This island state is the first country in the world to ban the production and import of plastic in all its forms. Actually, this is a made-up country. This is not real. So I tricked you all, but it just goes to show how little we know about these countries. Many of the countries presented here are just considered to be poor. But in fact, these and many other countries are progressing strongly and are becoming centers for innovation and entrepreneurship. But let's get back to some serious business, inclusive business. So I first heard about inclusive business when I read this book, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And it proposed that you can create profitable business models by meeting the needs of the poor. So when they talk about the pyramid, they refer to this pyramid here, which represents the population of Earth, broken up into 3 main groups. At the top, you have the mature markets, people living on more than $55 a day. In the middle, you have the emerging middle classes, people living on between $8 and $55 a day. And at the bottom, you have the base of the pyramid. And these are people living on less than $8 a day. So in 2002, when this book was written, there was 500 million people at the top, 2 billion people at the bottom, in the middle, and 4 billion people at the base of the pyramid, the BOP. And it's these 4 billion people that are the 4 billion reasons to make business more inclusive. 4 billion consumers, producers, and entrepreneurs that are often overlooked in the global economy. But when we talk about 4 billion people, how can we conceptualize such a large number? Well, 4 billion people is the equivalent to 400 times the population of Sweden, or about 8 times the population of the EU. And it's slightly larger than 50% of the world's population. So we're not talking about a niche market here. So if you have a business or are starting a business, do you think it might be worth looking into the opportunities of this massive market? So the thinking of inclusive business evolved from thinking about the BOP as a market opportunity. Simply put, inclusive business is about engaging the BOP in the value chain of business as consumers, producers, distributors, and entrepreneurs. And to me, when I looked at this concept made so much sense. Because traditional business focuses at the top of the pyramid, trying to sell more stuff to people who don't need more stuff. So doesn't it make sense that business should start to refocus on meeting the needs, the unmet needs, for the majority of people on the planet? And I'm talking about the 800 million people who don't have access to clean water, the 1 billion people excluded from basic health care, the 1.3 billion that don't have electricity, or the 2.3 billion that don't have adequate access to sanitation, or the 1 in 8 people on Earth that don't have enough to eat to be healthy, or those that lack education, transport, housing, communication solutions, etc. But inclusive business is more than just meeting consumer needs. It's also about engaging with this group as producers and entrepreneurs. And that could be working with smallholder farmers to help them become more productive. Or it could be helping entrepreneurs start small businesses. So, but how does that pyramid look today? Well, firstly, we've started to make a clearer distinction between two groups at the BOP. We have on one hand the extreme poor, people living on less than $2 a day. And we have the remaining low-income people living between $2 and $8 a day. But what's happening with our pyramid? It's looking kind of funny, isn't it? Well, that's because the extreme poor is actually reducing despite an ever-growing population. So the extreme poor used to be called the bottom billion, but today they're actually closer to 500 million. To better understand some of these levels, I like to use some of the Gapminder tools to help illustrate. And one way they've done this very well, I think, is with transportation, to think about, well, who are these groups? So the extreme poor, they get around using the wonderful invention of the feet. Low-income people might be able to have access to bicycles to travel longer distances. At the next level, they might be able to save up for a motorbike. And at the top of the pyramid, they become much more reliant on cars. So you might be saying, oh, well, that's all well and good, but is there a real business opportunity with the BOP? Well, the short answer is yes. In 2010, the World Bank estimated the BOP market opportunity at $5 trillion. And this is just for meeting basic needs of the BOP as consumers. And I would argue that the potential for doing business with the BOP as producers and as entrepreneurs could even be a larger business opportunity. Furthermore, this is where growth will come from. Global growth will come from the global south. Over 2019, expectations are that the EU will grow 1.9%, and that advanced economies in general will grow 2.2%. But emerging markets and developing markets will grow over 5%, almost 3 times as fast as that in the EU. The other thing is that in advanced markets, if you want to compete, you're competing in aggressive markets with a lot of competition. But at the base of the pyramid, there are so many unmet needs that you'll face much less competition, so it becomes a more attractive market. So what about the future? Well, by 2030, there'll be 8.5 billion people. Our pyramid will turn more into a diamond. The extreme poor of today will become the low-income people of tomorrow. And the low-income people of today will become the middle class of tomorrow. And so what does this mean? This means that businesses that invest in the BOP today will actually have a more numerous and wealthier market for the future. But I know what you're thinking. I know what happens if all of these people suddenly want to drive SUVs and eat entrecôte and take long showers. It'll destroy the environment. But a lot of the solutions at the BOP are actually better for the environment. So we're talking about solar lights instead of kerosene lanterns, or improved cook stoves that use less charcoal. Furthermore, this development is happening. So businesses need to make sure they can offer leaner, greener solutions to the BOP. Yes, we need to have electric cars, but don't we also need to have low-cost electric bicycles, motorbikes, and public transportation systems for this group? So, did I manage to convince you about the 4 billion reasons? Yeah. Great, I'll give myself a tick. So what about the one reason? Well, the one reason is Sustainability Development Goal number 1, which is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. I guess most of you are familiar with these, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, humanity's ultimate goals. Now, I love these big, beautiful boxes, but they don't come cheap. In developing markets alone, it will cost $3.9 trillion per year in order to achieve these goals by 2030. That's roughly the GDP of Germany, give or take a few hundred billion. So while we have charities and development agencies working towards these goals, we won't be able to get there without the private sector. And when we drill down in Sustainable Development Goal number 1, it's worth looking at the first 2 targets. Target 1.1 is to eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere. Target 1.2 is to reduce by at least half the proportion of people living in poverty in all its forms. And this takes into account a broader definition of poverty to include schooling, health factors, and access to energy, water, sanitation, etc. So while charities and development agencies work hard to get people out of extreme poverty, inclusive business has a role to play to get people out of and away from poverty. And getting people away from poverty is important because if someone's living on $3, $4, $5 a day, it only takes one bad harvest or someone to get sick for them to slip back into extreme poverty. But once they become more economically sustainable, their future looks a lot more promising. So is anyone doing this today? Well, I have a few examples here, including a few companies from that we're working with at Inclusive Business Sweden. The first one is Trine. And Trine addresses energy poverty by enabling individuals like you or I to invest in off-grid solar solutions in developing markets. So far, they've generated crowd investments of around 14 million euros that goes to solar entrepreneurs that can work with delivering solutions like these to the BOP market. Another company is Solvatten. And Solvatten develops these solar-powered jerry cans to produce clean water. And they've managed to provide clean water solutions for 300,000 people across 20 countries using this solution. Another company, Clean Cook, has developed this cook stove, which is now produced in South Africa and shipped to countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, and Haiti. And this addresses major problems with traditional cook stoves, major problems of air pollution and of deforestation with more efficient cook stoves. Another company, Göteborg, has developed an alternative to plastic using jute, which is produced in Bangladesh by jute farmers. And they've managed to, they're now working with using that alternative to plastic to produce products like these coat hangers, which will be used in the fashion industry. Not only are Göteborg working with that for the environmental benefits, but we're also working with them to ensure that the supply chain for jute is sustainable and that these jute farmers earn a good income for what they do. But it's not only small social entrepreneurs that are working with this space. Larger businesses like IKEA are working with this as well. For example, IKEA is working with marginalized groups in a number of countries and through social entrepreneurs to develop products that go into their stores. So for example, they're working with women artisans in India and with refugees in Jordan to produce some of these products. So these are just a few Swedish examples that I've chosen, but there's plenty more to look at and plenty more to talk about. But it's also worth more businesses to look at this opportunity because it is a tremendous market opportunity. So on a personal note, Having worked in the inclusive business space for almost a decade, I find it to be one of the most exciting areas around. It's fast-moving, highly innovative, quite challenging, and extremely rewarding. If you are a student or academic, I encourage you to consider doing research in this field. If you're part of civil society, consider how business partnerships can help you achieve your goals. And if you are in industry, I would highly recommend that you look into how you can make your business more inclusive. I hope I've given you at least a few billion reasons to do so. Thank you.